Let me tell you something crucial, something that might save you years of heartache, wasted time, and unnecessary suffering. The modern dating landscape is a minefield of confusion, where genuine connection is often buried beneath layers of distraction, immaturity, and self-deception. And if you're a woman of substance, a woman with standards, ambition, and self-respect, you cannot afford to waste your energy on a man who isn't ready for you. Because here's the hard truth. A real woman demands a real man, not a boy hiding in a man's body, not a Peter Pan who refuses to grow up, not a narcissist who sees relationships as transactions rather than sacred commitments, and certainly not someone who expects you to shrink yourself to fit his limitations. So, how do you know if he's not ready? How do you spot the red flags before they turn into a forest fire? It's not just about what he says, it's about what he does, what he tolerates, and what he refuses to confront in himself. Today, we're going to dissect 5 undeniable signs that reveal he's not prepared for the complexity, depth, and responsibility of loving a real woman. And if you recognize these in your relationship, or worse, in yourself, then it's time to wake up, set boundaries, and demand better, because you deserve nothing less. Let's begin with the most fundamental, non-negotiable marker of maturity: responsibility, or rather, the refusal to take it. This is where we separate the men from the boys, the adults from the eternal adolescents. A man who isn't ready for a real woman will treat responsibility like a hot potato, tossing it to anyone within reach: his parents, his ex, his boss, the economy, the system, even you. But here's the brutal truth. A man who cannot take responsibility for his own life has no business sharing it with someone else. Consider this. What does it mean to take responsibility? It means looking at your circumstances, your career, your finances, your health, your emotional baggage, and saying, this is mine to handle. Not your girlfriend's, not your therapist's, not society's, yours. A man stuck in victim mode will always have an excuse. I'd be successful if my boss wasn't an idiot. I'd be happy if my ex hadn't ruined me. I'd be motivated if the world wasn't so unfair. But excuses don't build futures. They don't pay bills. They don't nurture relationships. They just keep him stuck in the same loop of mediocrity. And if you tie yourself to that, you'll be dragged down with him. Now let's be clear, this isn't about perfection. A real woman doesn't expect a man to have everything figured out. Life is messy. Failure happens. But what she does expect is effort, progress, the willingness to face reality head-on rather than hiding behind a shield of blame. If he can't own his mistakes, if he can't admit when he's wrong, if he can't look at his life and say, I need to do better, then he is not ready for the weight of a real relationship. And here's why this matters so much. Responsibility is the foundation of trust. If he can't take responsibility for his own actions, how can you trust him to take responsibility for yours, for your heart, for your future? A man who shirks accountability in his personal life will inevitably shirk it in a relationship. He'll promise change but never follow through. He'll swear he loves you but never put in the work to prove it. He'll expect you to carry the emotional load while he coasts on charm and empty words. Worse yet, a man who avoids responsibility will resent you for having standards. If you call him out, he'll deflect. If you set boundaries, he'll act wounded. If you demand consistency, he'll accuse you of being too much. But here's the truth. You're not too much. He's just not enough. So how do you spot this early? Listen to how he talks about his life. Does he take ownership or does he play the victim? When he makes a mistake, does he apologize and correct course, or does he twist the narrative to avoid blame? When things get hard, does he step up or make excuses? And most importantly, watch what he does, not what he says. A man who's ready for a real woman doesn't just talk about responsibility, he lives it. He shows up, he follows through, he faces his flaws instead of running from them, because he knows that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, an action, a daily commitment to be better. If you see a man who can't do that, walk away, not with anger, not with drama, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knows her worth. Because the right man won't need to be dragged into maturity, he'll already be striving for it. And until then, you've got better things to do than raise a grown man. Let me paint you a picture of modern male escapism, that all too common phenomenon where men retreat into digital fantasy lands rather than face the challenging but rewarding terrain of real life. We're talking about the endless video game marathons that stretch into the early morning hours, the compulsive social media scrolling that kills productivity, the binge watching that replaces personal growth, and the empty sexual conquests that substitute for genuine intimacy. These aren't just bad habits, they're symptoms of a deeper refusal to engage with reality. The uncomfortable truth is this: a man who constantly needs to escape into distraction is a man unprepared for the demands of an adult relationship. Why? Because real love requires presence. It demands that you show up fully, emotionally available, mentally engaged, and willing to do the work even when it's uncomfortable. You can't build a meaningful connection with someone who's only half there, whose attention is perpetually divided between you and his digital pacifiers. Let's break this down psychologically. These distractions all serve the same purpose. They're dopamine delivery systems designed to provide quick hits of pleasure without any of the effort that real accomplishment requires. Leveling up in a video game gives you that rush of achievement without having to actually achieve anything in the real world. Casual hookups provide the chemical high of intimacy without any of the vulnerability or commitment. Social media offers the illusion of connection while keeping real relationships at arm's length. Here's the crucial distinction. Boys seek constant stimulation. Men cultivate the ability to focus and endure discomfort for a greater purpose. A man ready for a real woman understands that some of life's most rewarding experiences, building a career, maintaining a healthy relationship, raising a family, require delayed gratification. They demand that you tolerate frustration, boredom, and uncertainty in service of something more meaningful than momentary pleasure. The inability to sit with discomfort manifests in relationships in devastating ways. When conversations get difficult, he changes the subject or checks his phone. When you express emotional needs, he distracts with humor or physical affection rather than engaging. When faced with relationship challenges, he'd rather lose himself in entertainment than do the uncomfortable work of resolving conflicts. This creates what psychologists call attachment hunger, that awful feeling of being physically present with someone yet emotionally starved. Moreover, a distraction-addicted man inevitably becomes an energy drain in a relationship. Instead of being a partner who shares life's burdens, he becomes another responsibility you have to manage. You find yourself nagging him to put down the controller and engage with real life. You exhaust yourself trying to compete with the flashing lights and instant gratification of his digital world. And worst of all, you start shrinking your own expectations to accommodate his limitations. The real tragedy? This behavior often masks deep potential. Many of these men aren't inherently lazy or incapable. They're simply stuck in what psychologists call arrested development. They've never been challenged to grow up, never had to develop the discipline to focus, never learned that true satisfaction comes from mastery rather than distraction. But here's the hard truth. It's not your job to fix this. A real woman shouldn't have to play life coach to her partner. So, how do you recognize this pattern early? Look at how he spends his free time. Does he have hobbies that require skill and dedication, or just time-killing distractions? Can he have a conversation without glancing at his phone every 2 minutes? Does he follow through on commitments, or is he always too busy playing catch-up from wasted time? Most importantly, does he seem genuinely present when you're together, or is part of him always elsewhere? The right man will understand that while entertainment has its place, it shouldn't be the central focus of adult life. He'll be able to unplug, focus, and engage deeply with the real world, including you. He'll recognize that true fulfillment comes not from escaping reality, but from mastering it. And until you find that man, don't settle for someone who chooses fantasy over you. You deserve more than to compete with pixels and pretend worlds for your partner's attention. You deserve a man who's fully present in the one life you both actually have. There exists a particularly insidious form of male immaturity that often masquerades as confidence, the tendency to view women not as full human beings, but as accessories to male ego. This manifests in subtle but destructive ways. The way he name-drops exes to boost his social status, the performative generosity that expects sexual favors in return, the backhanded compliments meant to keep you slightly off balance. At its core, this behavior reveals a fundamental failure to recognize women as complete equals, as individuals with their own ambitions, intellects, and interior lives that exist independently of male validation. The psychological roots of this behavior trace back to what developmental theorists call the subject-object divide. A mature man understands that women are subjects, conscious beings with their own desires, fears, and complexities, just as rich and nuanced as his own. The immature male unconsciously treats women as objects, as mirrors for his masculinity, as trophies to elevate his status, or as emotional caretakers for his unresolved wounds. You'll notice this in conversation. Does he actually listen when you speak, or is he just waiting for his turn to talk? Does he engage with your ideas, or does he reflexively challenge them to assert dominance? Does he respect your boundaries, or does he push against them to test his control? This objectification creates what psychologists call relational asymmetry, a fundamental imbalance where his needs, schedule, and emotions consistently take priority. He expects you to rearrange your life to accommodate his whims, but becomes petulant when asked to return the favor. He wants unlimited access to your emotional support, but withdraws when you need vulnerability from him. He enjoys the idea of a strong woman in theory, but in practice feels threatened when your strength exceeds his own. This isn't just selfishness, it's the mark of someone who fundamentally doesn't see you as an equal partner, but as a supporting character in his personal narrative. The most dangerous aspect of this mindset is how it sabotages intimacy before it can even form. Real connection requires mutual vulnerability, the courage to stand before another person without defenses, to be truly seen in all your complexity. But a man who views women as objects can never truly let his guard down, because doing so would require acknowledging your full humanity. Instead, you get performative vulnerability, carefully curated weaknesses designed to elicit your nurturing instincts, while his real fears and shames remain safely hidden. The relationship becomes a stage where he acts the part of a good partner, rather than an authentic space where two souls genuinely meet. Financial behavior often reveals this mindset with startling clarity. Notice whether he splits bills without resentment, or whether he uses money as leverage for control. Observe whether he supports your career ambitions, or whether he subtly undermines them to keep you dependent. Pay attention to whether he respects your time as valuable as his own, or whether he expects you to wait on his unreliable schedule. These aren't just relationship quirks. They're litmus tests for whether he sees you as an equal. The tragedy is that many women, especially those with nurturing dispositions, mistake this behavior for something they can fix with enough love and patience. They pour endless energy into proving their worth, not realizing the game is rigged. You can't convince someone of your humanity if they're committed to seeing you as something less. The heartbreaking truth is that no amount of feminine grace can compensate for masculine immaturity. A man must choose to grow up on his own, and until he does, he'll continue to shrink the women in his life to fit his limited understanding. Watch for the telltale signs early. Does he speak about women in his past with basic respect, or does he reduce them to stereotypes? Does he celebrate your achievements, or does he subtly compete with them? Does he engage with your mind, or does conversation always circle back to his interests? Most crucially, Does being with him make you feel more fully yourself, or does it require you to mute certain parts of your personality? The right man won't just tolerate your wholeness, he'll demand it. He'll understand that real love isn't about possession, but about mutual becoming. He'll want your mind as much as your body, your dreams as much as your comfort. Until you find that man, never settle for someone who loves the idea of you more than the reality, who wants a girlfriend in theory, but can't handle the glorious, complicated, fully human woman in front of him. You're not a supporting character in anyone's story, you're the author of your own. A man without vision is like a ship without a rudder, constantly drifting, never arriving, and ultimately dangerous to anyone who boards alongside him. This aimlessness manifests most painfully in relationships, where his lack of direction becomes your shared burden. You'll recognize this type immediately. He's the one who changes jobs every 6 months but never advances, who talks about dreams but never acts, who's perpetually figuring things out while years slip by unnoticed. The tragedy isn't just his wasted potential, but how his stagnation inevitably limits yours. A real woman, a woman with fire in her belly and purpose in her stride, cannot thrive tethered to someone who views life as something that happens to him rather than something he creates. This lack of vision goes deeper than mere indecisiveness. At its core, it represents a failure of masculine initiation, a refusal to answer life's most fundamental question: what are you willing to suffer for? Boys avoid discomfort at all costs. Men choose their struggles wisely. When you press this man about his future, you'll notice the evasion tactics, vague statements about going with the flow, deflective humor, or worse, resentment toward your ambition. His passivity isn't philosophical, it's psychological. He hasn't consciously chosen a simple life. He's unconsciously avoiding the responsibility of choosing anything at all. This becomes toxic in relationships because vision isn't just about career goals. It's about having something worth building together. A man ready for commitment doesn't just tolerate your dreams. He has complementary ones that create synergy rather than competition. The most insidious damage occurs in the subtle power dynamics. When you're the only one with direction, you inevitably become the de facto leader in the relationship, the planner, the motivator, the adult. This might feel empowering initially, but over time it breeds quiet resentment on both sides. He resents your expectations, you resent having to create all the momentum. What begins as patience becomes enabling, and what looks like support becomes maternal caretaking. Healthy relationships require parallel growth, two people moving forward together, not one dragging the other kicking and screaming into adulthood. His lack of vision forces you into an unnatural role, and no amount of love can compensate for this structural imbalance. Financial behavior reveals this character flaw with brutal clarity. Notice whether he invests in his future or just spends on immediate gratification. Observe whether he can discuss 5-year plans without discomfort or whether he mocks such conversations as stressful. Most tellingly, watch how he reacts to your success. Does it inspire him or does it threaten him? A man secure in his own path will celebrate your victories. A man adrift will subtly sabotage them to maintain equilibrium. This isn't just about money. It's about the fundamental orientation toward time itself. Future-oriented people build, present-oriented people consume. You cannot construct a life with someone who only knows how to spend the days as they come. The cruelest irony? These men often mistake their lack of direction for some profound spiritual stance, as if their refusal to plan constitutes enlightenment rather than avoidance. They'll quote Zen proverbs about living in the moment while ignoring the Buddhist concept of right livelihood. They'll romanticize poverty while secretly relying on your stability. This isn't wisdom. It's weaponized inertia, and it will grind your momentum to a halt if you let it. A real woman doesn't need a man with all the answers, but she does need one asking the right questions, one actively engaged in the creative act of becoming, rather than passively waiting for life to shape him. Watch for the warning signs early. When discussing the future, does he speak in I will statements or I hope phrases? Does he take concrete steps toward goals or just talk about them when inspired? Most crucially, does being with him expand your sense of what's possible, or does it quietly lower your expectations over time? The right man won't have his entire life mapped out, but he'll have a clear heading and the discipline to stay on course. He'll understand that love isn't just about companionship, it's about having someone to build with, struggle with, and triumph with. Until you find that man, guard your vision fiercely. Never let someone else's lack of direction become the anchor that keeps you from sailing toward your destiny. You weren't put on this earth to be kept small by someone who's afraid to grow. The inability to navigate conflict with emotional maturity reveals more about a man's readiness for commitment than any grand romantic gesture ever could. This deficiency manifests in two equally destructive extremes: the silent withdrawer who stonewalls at the first sign of tension, and the explosive reactor who turns every disagreement into a battlefield. Both versions share the same root problem: an underdeveloped emotional musculature that cannot tolerate discomfort long enough to reach resolution. The silent type mistakes avoidance for peacekeeping, not realizing his withdrawal is a form of violence, a cold war that leaves his partner stranded in emotional no man's land. The explosive type confuses aggression with strength, unaware that real power lies in measured response, not uncontrolled reaction. Neither possesses the psychological stamina required for true intimacy, because love isn't tested during easy moments, it's forged in the fire of disagreement. Watch carefully how a man handles frustration in mundane situations: the misplaced keys, the traffic jam, the delayed order at dinner. These micro moments reveal his emotional blueprint far more accurately than any curated serious conversation ever could. Does inconvenience make him petty? Does stress bring out his cruelty? Does he take responsibility for his moods, or expect the world to accommodate them? The man who cannot master his emotions in everyday life will inevitably weaponize them in your relationship. He'll punish you with silence when hurt, overwhelm you with intensity when angry, and shame you for having needs that disrupt his comfort. This creates what psychologists call walking on eggshells syndrome, that awful hypervigilance where you start censoring yourself to avoid setting him off. No relationship can thrive under these conditions, because trust cannot grow where honesty feels dangerous. The healthiest relationships don't avoid conflict. They transform it into connection through what experts call rupture and repair. This requires emotional agility, the ability to stay present when feelings intensify, to articulate needs without accusation, to listen without becoming defensive. A man ready for real love approaches arguments as collaborations rather than competitions. He seeks mutual understanding rather than victory. Contrast this with the immature response, the immediate counterattack when criticized, the reflexive blame shifting, the inability to simply say, "I was wrong," without qualification. These defensive patterns originate in what attachment theory calls fragile high self-esteem, a shaky self-image that cannot withstand scrutiny. His ego remains so brittle that any feedback feels like an existential threat, making growth impossible. You'll recognize this in his reaction to even gentle critique. Does he reflect or retaliate? Does he clarify or criticize? The answers predict your future. Perhaps most damaging is how emotional immaturity stifles authentic communication over time. Early on, you might voice concerns directly. After repeated explosions or withdrawals, you start editing, softening grievances, swallowing needs, pretending things don't bother you. This isn't compromise, it's self-abandonment. Studies show relationships die not from conflict, but from the accumulation of unexpressed resentments. The man incapable of healthy conflict resolution doesn't just fail to solve problems. He teaches you to stop bringing them up. The irony? He'll often complain you don't communicate enough while systematically punishing you for doing so. This creates the ultimate relational paradox. The less you say, the better the relationship seems, because peace is maintained through suppression rather than resolution. Financial behavior often reveals this pattern with startling clarity. Notice how he handles money disagreements. Does he discuss budgets rationally or become defensive about spending? Observe his reaction when you're more financially savvy. Does he admire it or resent it? Money conflicts magnify emotional patterns because they combine practical stakes with deep psychological symbolism. The man who sees your financial prudence as criticism rather than teamwork demonstrates an emotional rigidity that will poison every area of your relationship. The tragic misconception many women make is believing a man's post-conflict remorse indicates potential for change. They confuse his guilt-fueled gifts and promises with genuine growth, not realizing these are often just emotional reset buttons, ways to restore harmony without doing the hard work of actual transformation. Real change requires consistent effort over time, not grand apologies after explosions. Watch for this critical distinction. Does he modify behavior before conflicts recur, or just apologize spectacularly after damage is done? One builds trust, the other erodes it. Ultimately, a man's conflict style determines the emotional climate of your relationship more than any other factor. You can survive imperfect chemistry, financial stress, even differing interests, but you cannot thrive with someone who turns every disagreement into a trauma. The right man won't be perfect, but he'll be accountable. He won't always know exactly what to say, but he'll stay engaged until you figure it out together. Most importantly, he'll understand that love isn't about never hurting each other. It's about repairing well when you do. Until you find that man, never mistake volatility for passion or silence for strength. You deserve more than walking on eggshells. You deserve solid ground to stand on.